Okay, here we go. Hey guys, thank you for tuning in if you're back with me, and thank you for joining us if this is your first time. This is actually my first guest or my first podcast, including someone who is actually one of my best friends, so it should be pretty easy. And it's actually kind of impromptu. We've been meaning to have this conversation. We've actually had this conversation, our title, which is Red Flags. We've talked about it a few times in the past, and every time we have the conversation, I'm like, hold on, stop. Like, let's wait till we can do this in like podcast formation. So this was impromptu, not planned. So we're just jumping on here and decided to have this conversation, right? Along with our watermelon martinis. Thank you
Very welcome.
to my host. So let's jump into it. You ready?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right. So this is how I want to start it. Red flags. I feel like we say it all the time, like red flags. There's so many memes about it, like jokes about us just slapping them out of the way, stepping on them, walking right past them, not paying them any attention. And it's funny when you see you see those memes or the conversation comes up. But in actual real life, for me, speaking from my own experience, I feel like when things go wrong, and it could be in a relationship, a friendship, work, any scenario. Today we're going to kind of concentrate on relationships. But when things go wrong or they, go awry or everything just comes tumbling down, you can kind of look back, and that's when all of those red flags that you might have thought weren't such a big deal, all of a sudden they become a big deal, and you're like, wow, that really was a red flag, and I really should have paid attention to that. So I want to start it off pretty basic. I didn't even introduce her yet. Excuse me, I just jump right into things. This is my best friend, Chantel. Yes. Who is she's a spa owner. We'll get into that later. But Chantel you've used dating apps in the past, right?
Correct.
I have not. And no, just because I just never, I don't know. I just never really got into it. But I know that you know a lot about it. You're pretty well versed, and you know how all of it works. So the first question I want to ask you is, if you've used dating apps, you've probably gone on a few first dates.
Lot of first dates.
A lot of first dates. I mean, that's a whole other. I want to do another podcast another time that just focuses on first dates, red flags or no red flags. But that being said, when you have a lot of first dates, that means they were just like one time and that was it, right?
Absolutely.
So when it is a first date, and there's no others after it, I would think that there might have been some red flags along the way that you're like, you know what? I don't want to do this again. I don't want to go out with this person again. Definitely. So can you share some of, and randomly, whatever comes to mind, just share some of the red flags that you've experienced. And I'm going to sip my martini while you tell this story.
Well, some of the red flags are, the number one red flag is that they don't look like their picture. So that is, like, anybody who's hiding behind...
I never even thought of that.
Their actual, like you show up and you're like, is this picture from like the 80s or? Because you definitely are 20 years older than this picture. So for me, if they don't have updated pictures, or they show up and they're drastically different from their picture or drastically different from what their profile states who they are, for me, that's a red flag, because that means you're hiding behind your personality or you're hiding behind your looks, or there's something that you're insecure about. And so insecurity in one area is insecurity in many areas.
Okay.
So
I never even thought of that. I guess I just figured, just with Instagram and just all these social media platforms, I feel like they're usually pretty much up to date, but I guess it can be different on a dating app because they don't always have. Okay, so I have questions. Okay, so let's say out of 10 people, not saying that she's been on 10 first dates, but okay. So let's take 10. So out of 10, what would you say is the percentage of how many of them looked like their picture?
Probably about 50%.
Half. Wow. Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. Have you ever Have you ever been on a first date and she's always on time? So I'm gonna guess that you're usually there meeting someone, or sometimes there first,
Right.
so that you can scope it out. Have you ever seen someone walk towards you and you didn't think it was them?
Absolutely.
And then when they walk up to you,
and I can't really hide because my pictures are up to date, so they have a clear depiction of who I am. But there's once a couple of times I wanted to be like, "Who? I'm sorry, that's not me." But I so look like my pictures. It's almost impossible to do. But
so they were like, "Hey, Chantel," and you were looking at them like
walking up to me, and I'm like, "Please don't be him. Please don't be him. Please don't be him. Please." Damn it! It's him.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So that's just like number one, I guess. First, face value.
And
already
also
not.
things like, if they only have, like I had this one guy, he had like 8 pictures on his profile, and they were all headshots. And just I'm glad because I want to see his face, but now I require full body shots.
Why?
Because
what it was?
a couple of times, this particular guy, like, no, nothing. I like big boys, so let me just tell you, I'm a small girl. I like big boys. Somebody's got to keep us warm in the winter, right? And he was probably 5'2", 5'3".
Oh, so that's what you're talking about.
And
so literally shorter than you.
He was shorter than me, and he was wearing skinny jeans, so I assume he was probably in a really small size, like 28, as far as like jeans are concerned.
Okay.
And it was just not my style.
Threw you off. And so then
pants rolled up, I can see your ankles, got on loafers, no socks. Nothing wrong with that look if that's the look that you're going for, but it's not mine. So.
But now you require, you look at full body shots.
Or I ask, like, how tall are you? Okay. Which is very superficial. And I'm not very tall, but you gotta be taller than me.
I don't want to go far down that road. I wouldn't say I don't know that it's superficial. I don't want to get too far into it, but a lot of women have a preference on height as men. So it's not superficial. I mean, it's kind of like a preference. And as you said, as women, sometimes we look at men, or some of us can look at men as, like you said, keep you warm or sort of a protector. So sometimes, their physical appearance just plays into that. So it's a preference. It doesn't mean that you're superficial. Not to say that, you could fall in love with someone who's, I don't know.
I definitely could.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to get past. I mean, like, we're visual creatures.
Yeah.
I mean, hence Instagram and TikTok, and we're visual. We're visual creatures, and you have to appeal visually before you can appeal mentally.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we digress a little, but let's get into some I don't know, not juicy stuff, but let's say now you're on the first date. So let's say the guy he's in the 50% that looks similar to his picture. So what are some red flags? I'm going to just throw out some things. I don't know, like when you're talking about work, maybe they talk too much, they don't listen, they don't have much to say, they talk about their ex. I don't know, they can't find their wallet. Like, I don't know. What are some red flags that you've run into?
Well, I mean, some of the things that I look for on a first date is, especially if we're at a restaurant or a bar or something like that, how they treat the servers. And also how much they tip.
Okay. You know what? We might have to do a first date 101 with you or something.
Right.
Okay.
And
so what does that mean to you? Let's say that what about if they, I'm not going to ask about complaining about food, because you actually you're actually, you're kind of difficult in the restaurant, so you probably don't, I don't want to call her a complainer, but she probably doesn't mind when someone, someone who sends their food back.
It cannot be excessive. Like, sometimes things don't go right. I mean, and you get that. But it's how you deal with things that go wrong. Okay. So it's not that they send the food back. If it's wrong, it's wrong. Mm-hmm. But it's, there's a level of grace that comes with that.
Okay.
And absolutely. How you deal with, understand that our servers aren't our cooks. They are, they're the middle people. So getting testy with a server or a manager, it's inappropriate.
Yep.
Because
so you've witnessed that?
Oh yeah, I went on this date with a guy, and we were at Cracker Barrel for breakfast, which was like borderline. For me, it's at the bottom. It's probably the lowest I'll go. But and he just complained about everything, and he was very snappy with this server to the point it made her very nervous, and it was things beyond her control. Like, the first thing was that he ordered a water with lemon. She brought water with no lemons. He complained about that. That's a service issue. So she brought the lemons, and then he complained about how the lemons looked. That has nothing to do with her.
Yeah.
Then when he brought out the food, the eggs weren't cooked the way that he wanted to. That's not a service issue. That's a cook issue. She's bringing out the food that's under her table number.
Yeah.
And so he was just like, this is just horrible. Get a manager. And it's like, we get a manager, and you had people staring at us. I was embarrassed.
So you felt like it was over the top?
It was definitely over the top.
Okay, so I have a question. So let's say if we use that as a red flag, which hopefully people that are listening, you start turning, like, is it a big deal? And this is what I want to say about red flags, is that you can look at a situation like that and isolate and be like, okay, this person is kind of picky about their food, right? And they're just one thing after another for them wasn't hitting the mark. Again, it's like you can think not much of that, but let's say you move forward, or you move forward, and then it's like down the line you see that this person is kind of like has a quick temper, or is easily agitated, or is super picky, or doesn't treat people very well. It's like, meaning initially sometimes things aren't a complete full red flag, but as time goes on you're like, damn, I knew this person had this potential from the beginning. So I'm not saying with every red flag you need to run away, but again, it's like you can trace things back sometimes. Yeah.
So for me, it's not about the food. It wasn't about the lemons. It was the manner in which he spoke to her. And, not saying that servers, are less than, but I look at how people treat people that they consider has a job that's, inferior to their own. Mm-hmm. So how you treat someone who has no quote unquote value to you tells me about your personality
and your character.
So it wasn't about the server. It wasn't about the lemons. It wasn't about the food not being cooked right, but it was how he handled it.
So did he notice? I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but I can't even think of an experience recently. Something happened. I don't remember how long ago, but did he notice that you were uncomfortable? Like how you? So that's the thing is that. Noticed. So to me, that's a red flag. Like for me, that would be a red flag. Is even regardless of what someone's job is or whatever, it's like how you treat a woman or women, can have a bearing on how other women around you feel. You know what I mean? Like just treating a woman, period, in a certain way can make the woman that's with you feel uncomfortable. I think sometimes I think sometimes men don't realize that, and many times they do. But okay, so I'm trying to think. I'm gonna share, like, this is my craziest. This is a first date red flag. Well, I think it was way beyond a red flag. Excuse me, but this is like the craziest first date story that I ever had. I don't know if I ever told you this. I'm gonna try to make it a long story short. There was this guy, I would call him a gentleman, but I can't. This guy that I ran into a few times, and he had I just out and about, and asked me for my number a couple times, and I said no, and then eventually I'm like, he was persistent, like, okay, gave my number, and we exchanged very few texts back and forth, but decided to get together to have a drink, right? So I'm talking about a couple of months. He was very busy. He was in dental school or something. So whatever, we eventually meet up. I drive there, of course, first date, go meet somewhere neutral. And really for me, it's just like, okay, we're just going to have a drink. So I like a time limit on it. Like, we might just be here for an hour, say hello, get the vibe, whatever, and then go separate ways. So we meet there. He comes, and I want to say that, so he basically talked about himself the whole time, which is fine. For me...
No, it's not.
Well, meaning, again, this is a red flag that you could kind of, I guess you could... you can consider it a red flag, but you might be able to get past it because you're like, maybe this person is... He was talking about his work mostly. He was super passionate. Really didn't inquire about me too much. Again, it's fun. So I'm like, I'm scoping it out, like, okay, listening to him. And we're like sitting at the bar. So anyways, he's like going through all of that. And then at one point, and I had plans afterwards. I was going to meet up with one of my friends from high school, one of my homies. So who's probably going to watch this podcast. So shout out to Joey. So... He texted me hey, what's up? What time are we meeting? Because we were gonna go out, after I was left the bar. Anyway, so the guy that I was meeting with, first date guy, goes into the bathroom. So when he comes back out, I was like probably texting my friend, put it down, and I put my phone, obviously on the bar. It was probably right in between us. So my friend texts back. You could see, the text alert come up. Joey, I don't know what he said. Like, okay, call me when you're done, whatever. As we were like I'm wrapping it up, because again, we had text for like probably like a month or so or more than that, like to get together because he's super busy. So I'm like, oh, do you have tests tomorrow? Do you have a big day? I'm starting to wrap it up. Out of nowhere, he just started pretty much like almost yelling at me that I was probably gonna go. I know, look at your face. I know. So that was my face, right? So he starts yelling at me like, I know you're probably gonna go hook up with your friend Joey, like, go ahead. Because he was looking at my phone, so he just went on this rant about just go ahead, and I was on my phone, and I'm rude, and F this, F that, like, really, like, yelling and swearing. It was like almost like bipolar-ish. I'm like, what the hell? So, and I'm like, I have no reason to explain this to you. First of all, Joey's been my friend since high school. Second of all, why are you looking at my phone? Third, why are you screaming? He started swearing. The bartender, like, leaned over and swore at him and told him to get the F out. He's like, you're not going to act like that or talk to her. And then he was like, he said he was only going to pay for his drink. He, like, put the money down, and the bartender was like, we don't even want your money. Get out of here and never come back. So, long story short.
Wow. You never told me this.
No, it was so crazy. It was like funny. I wasn't even offended really, because it was just on such a different, he was on such a different level. I'm like, okay, I don't know what's wrong with him. I don't know if he needed meds. I don't know what happened. But this is my point, and there was a meme that I saw the other day. The bartender was like, he told me he was cringing. He was like, I was so glad that guy, he asked me, are you okay? And he's like, I've been listening to that fucking guy talk for like an hour about himself. Like, give me an effing break. Like, you don't even need to deal with that. So, meaning, to me, I relate that to a red flag is that, someone on the outside, it was already like, what the hell with this dude? And I'm like, again, with the red flags, you're like, okay, maybe he's passionate about his job. He's really excited. He's likes to talk about himself. That's not the worst thing. Obviously, it was never going to go past that. But it's just funny that, it's not funny, actually, but red flags are much more easily sometimes identifiable, like, looking from the outside. Because we've been there. We're not going to get specific, but, like, there's been times that you might have looked at someone that you saw me around, and I looked at, and you're like, girl.
Like, what are you doing?
Girl.
What are you doing?
Girl, this red flag, like,
can we talk?
Yeah, right. So it's again, it's a funny thing, but I feel like as we get older, to me, it is acting on those red flags is so important as you get older. I feel like, when you're in your 20s, maybe even early 30s, you can kind of make some mistakes, and you're giving people a pass because you're like, he's in his 20s, he's in his 30s, he has things to learn, that you got to allow people to grow. But as you get older, F that. Those red flags, you see it, you have to, you really, really have to take a good look at it, and or you have an expiration date on it. You know what I mean? Like, it's a red flag, you're like, okay, he acted kind of like that. I'm going to give him a little bit of breathing room. Men too, you can look at a woman and say, I'm going to give her a little bit of breathing room. And then if this continues, I'm going to act on this red flag. Because I tell you, it is going to come back to kick your ass. Because I cannot think of one a relationship that I've counseled anyone on that red flags did not exist early on. Okay, so I'm not, once in a while they just, there's something that springs up in the middle of nowhere, but almost always it is
autocorrect
early on.
And some of them aren't really red flags. Some of the flags are on fucking fire.
Oh, there you go. Right. On fire.
And they're on fire. And we're like, maybe it's just a little smoke.
And wait, and you're on fire, and you're just patting it out like it's gonna be okay. I just need,
It's just a little chemical burn.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Throw some water on me. It's summertime. We're getting the pool anyway, right? But okay, so first dates. Oh, and one that I have to say is a huge red flag for me. I don't even know if it's first dates or just at any point, is somebody who's always on their phone and texting.
Yeah. For me, it's really not about, because I'm guilty of being on my phone.
That's why
I'm not guilty of being on my phone on a date.
Hold on 1 second. Just the way she just paused and she's like, yeah.
But my thing is being on your phone in secrecy.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is, like, I was dating a guy, long-term relationship, and he would be on his phone, but it would be like,
okay, little sus,
or
little
when
suspect.
I would come into the room, immediately he would turn his phone over. And it's like, hey, it's a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe the screen was hot and he's trying to cool it down.
I would never say that. No, but it's you tell yourself. I mean, really, all of this. I mean, it's a conversation. It's an organic conversation, but it's really about what do you learn from it, right? And how do you? It's not just we know what red flags are. Okay, and that's the thing, is that we know them, but it's how do we deal with them? How do we brush them off? And which things are we willing to kind of like, because the red flag ultimately is some bullshit you're going to have to deal with. So it's kind of like a marker of what are you willing to deal with? I have like a list that I'm going to publish at some point, just like my 10 rules of, just the relationship you have with yourself, and what you're willing to accept. And one of them is, for me, how things start are almost always how they continue, unless you fix it along the way. So meaning, like, if that's how something starts, if someone's like secretive, it's going to continue that way.
And it's only going to exacerbate, actually. So for me, it's like, when I find a red flag, it might not necessarily be in the definition of red flag, but it's like, red flags are what you're willing to deal with. So it's like, everything that you're willing to deal with at the beginning of the relationship, understand that it's going to magnify by 3 or 4 times. And if you can handle that magnification, then by all means ignore it. And maybe it's something that's super small. Maybe it's a personality trait of your own,
right?
And not necessarily a red flag at all.
Right, because you can confuse something that triggers you, something that you don't like, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that person, that it's something they do that you don't like. It doesn't mean it's a red flag. It just means it's a trigger for you. It's something that just doesn't go. So you have to kind of just define what that is. To me, I think a red flags for me, it's like a way that someone may ultimately act towards me, or things that they may do that I consider to be just offensive, or will some at one point be a true problem. Not something that I don't like, but you know what I mean? Right. But like an issue along the way, as far as our relationship or a relationship could be concerned. I have another, like, this is the last story that I'm going to share. But a red flag, so someone that I dated, probably, I don't know, I guess it was a like worst relationship that I had, and still wasn't terrible. Anyways, it ended, and they were a jerk. And I actually, like, anyone that I've ever like dated or known, are still really good friends of mine. So this is probably the only person that just is not, we're just not friends. It's just, you cut your ties and you go separate ways, and that was it. But they were, they just turned out to be a jerk. And I mean, like, there's other words, but I don't want to use them, but just like a real jerk. Like, I just don't like the person that they are, or don't like the person they are. Anyways, I kind of, like, when it all was said and done, I went in my brain to trace it back. And I'm like, where, obviously I knew that this person had this in them. Where did this first like rear its ugly head? Like when did it really like catch me off guard? And I remember that it was just like a day that I don't know. He was like giving me a ride. We were supposed to go somewhere, and I had to pick up my car from a parking lot. And
I know this story.
And I'm not even gonna get into it, but he basically brought me to the parking lot to get my car, and he was just irritated about. It doesn't even matter what he was irritated. He was just irritated that my car was there. He didn't really understand why I was there and not my house. Anyways, brought me to pick up my car, and he was so like pissed off. He like we were supposed to go somewhere, mind you. He just like dropped me off and pulled away, or like did like I don't know. It wasn't like it was like halfway dramatic, but it was like left. So whatever, the kind of person, right? So, but it's like so unbelievable to me. I'm like, because that's never happened to me. I'm like, what the hell was that? That was, and I think sometimes we've discussed this before. I don't really necessarily get offended when someone does that. I'm not like, oh my God, you left me. Like, what kind of like? I look at them like, wow, that was really stupid. That was really a whack, unmanly thing to do. But whatever, because I'm kind of like that's a whole other subject. But I don't really take on people's bullshit when they do bullshit. I just let them own their bullshit and I let them keep it pushing with their bullshit. However, that little attitude of mine is a red flag. It was 100% red flag that for me, because I'm again like when I don't like something, I kind of just reject it. I don't even let it enter my space of like bothering me or offending me. I kick it out. But in that case, I should have given it some more merit and been like, you know what? That someone who would do that, like I can't deal with that. I mean, I guess it didn't really bother me because I'm not stranded. I'm at my car and I just went on about my business that night. But I traced it back to that one moment, and it really and that was like I learned from that. Like I honestly learned from that, and I'm like, girl, even though you think you know everything about red flags, like even if something may be a red flag in that sense, and it doesn't really offend me. Pay attention, T. Like it was a red flag. So that just really it stuck in my mind. That being said,
well, I had a relationship. Right?
Okay, I was just and that's what I was gonna say. That being said, I want to now continue into a bit of share some of your red flag experiences.
I can trace back the red flag. I was in a relationship for about 4 years, and I can trace back to the very first red flag.
And hold on. I knew there were red flags, but I said, you know what? This is her man. Support your friend. And I said, you know what? Maybe I think it's a red flag. So it wasn't a surprise to me, but I just want to say that sometimes when something comes about, like in that situation, it was like everything clicked. I felt like it was like, there were red flags popping up. We didn't even know what red flags. It was like boom, 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 boom. After all was said and done. So go ahead, continue.
So the very first red flag he was the king of disappearing acts, and so, which is a red flag, ladies. Even if it's just for a couple of hours, unaccounted for, but he would go days. Sometimes weeks.
Okay, hold on. So let's break this down a bit, because I also think because you're so independent and have so much going on, and you're a traveler, you're a business owner. Mm-hmm. So I want to preface it with that. So you may not be paying as much attention to someone when they're not necessarily going missing, but you haven't heard from them. But when you have such a full life and you're like, hey, because it
gives me an opportunity to catch up on my life.
Right. Okay.
So it wasn't.
So you weren't looking at him.
It wasn't a negative thing to me. It was like, oh, I can breathe. Mm-hmm. I need to do this for my kids. I need to do this for my business. I need to do this for my clients. I can travel. I need to go see my mom. So it just kind of gave me the space that I needed. And then one day I'll look up and I'm like, it's been 3 days since I heard from him. Like, I didn't realize it had been so long.
So wait, hold on. So, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but so in your mind, do you feel like, okay, because of the way that your life is and you're busy and you're moving and time can pass quickly, you kind of felt that he was
doing the exact same thing.
Okay.
So the difference is that he was living in one city and working in another.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times there was time differences, there was travel differences, there was business deadlines, there was work deadlines for both of us. And so not having to, what I loved about it was not having to micromanage his emotions. But what I found out much later, that it was much greater than that. And so going back to the very first red flag was the very first time he disappeared. My birthday is September 26th. And he disappeared September 21st. And I didn't hear from him until my actual birthday. He showed up at my house with a dozen roses and I had been texting him and calling him, like in those days, like, are you okay? Are you all right? Where are you? And I was either getting very little response or no response at all. Fast forward to 4 years later, I find out that he had a whole nother relationship with another woman, and their anniversary was September 22nd. Mm. So him disappearing on the 21st,
I don't even think I
through the 26th
made sense.
Made sense because he was on an anniversary trip with someone else. But I can, like I said, I can pinpoint it back to that very first time, and I kind of brushed it off. It's like, I think we had only been dating at that point for about maybe 2 or 3 months.
Okay. So, and
it wasn't a serious relationship. So I wasn't like, where are you? Where you been? Where you at? Where your mom at? Where you know, it wasn't none of those things. So it was kind of like, And I, you know, when he came back, he was so charismatic. And when he came back into the picture, he was highly attentive when he was there. Like, highly, like, unbridled attention when he was there. Mm-hmm. And so it just, like, there couldn't possibly be someone else because there's, like, he's here with me and I'm getting all this attention. But, you know, it continued on for 4 years.
Just kind of, yeah, like the ups and downs. And I think sometimes, just to interject, I think that there are times that at least I have talked to many women in the past. It's kind of, or about their relationships, is when someone is kind of distant, you know, you give them a pass. It's not even a pass, but you're being understanding of, okay, they need some time to themselves. You know, they just they need to reflect, or they need to disengage for a little while. But one thing I want to say, because remember I said this to you. This is what I said, and this is just my opinion, but I've seen it play out many times. But someone like the person that she's discussing, when that person is in her presence, highly attentive. Okay, so you know, highly attentive with her, with everyone around her.
Highly engaged with my family, my friends, my job, my business, like just everything. Like,
so what didn't make sense to me, if you remember, and I said, you know, I don't really know, and I said, but to me, it's like, I don't really see people as having this, well, you know, from my experience, an on-off switch. So I'm like, when this person is around you, it's not needy, but, you know, not needy, but they want to spend that time with you. You know what I mean? They're in your face. They're there. They're not going anywhere. They appear to like that, you know, hand-to-hand kind of attention. But then all of a sudden, you know, you don't talk to them or see them for however, you know, whatever that dip is. Then all of a sudden they're a person that completely switch off and they're to themselves. That's the type of thing that doesn't make sense. Again, are there some people that are like that? Yes, there are.
And I recognized in him specifically a couple of like mental issues that
whole other podcast
that he needed to deal with. So during those times when he would tell me that he was just having a mental episode, he got a pass from me because I know that there are things that he needed to deal with his own mental health. And I know that when I get into those spaces, I really just need to deal with those things and not have the emotional responsibility of someone else. Yep. And so that was my assumption.
So it sounds like, I mean, which we do a lot, is you kind of gauge what he's doing by sort of like your own life and your own standard, which it's good to give someone that level of understanding. It's always good to give people a level of understanding. But again, when this is about like identifying a red flag, like, do they deserve that understanding? You know, are they, because to be quite frank, it's like, okay, if that, trying to break that situation down, when he's around you, he's in your face, right?
Right.
But you're not necessarily needing to be that kind of person, because even when you are in a relationship, you're still a person that goes off and does shopping by yourself, still hangs with your friends. You still do a lot of other things. So you yourself exhibit that type of, you know, non-needy behavior. So you gave him the non-needy behavior pass, but that's not really what he showed you. Right. I guess that's what I'm saying. So that's the part of,
and it wasn't like it was often. Don't get me wrong. It was like, in the 4 years, there were probably 6 episodes of disappearance that were noticeably.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like I said, they were only like a day or two. And so it wasn't like, and they were so far in between too. You know? Like from that September incident, the next time was like 18 months later that it happened. So, you know, we're talking about being highly attentive for 18 months straight and then disappearing for like a week. And then so, in the name of mental health.
Yeah. And that I can, you know, that's the other thing, is that, you know, you can't always go running away from the red flag, I guess, or something that appears to be a red flag. You have to apply some understanding and you know, some wisdom to it, and not wanting everything to be your way, and paying attention to your own triggers. So there are times when you just have to, you know, let it rock and figure it out, and in the end it turns out to be a red flag. You didn't know that, but you did your best. But I think that we can, in a lot of cases, we can definitely, in many cases, we can do a better job of how we deal with it. Because I would guess for you, like in hindsight, in retrospect, you know, let's say it was 6 times, now know what you know, you're like, maybe you would have stopped it at the 3rd.
At 2. I would have stopped it at 2.
At 2.
But the point is that, like, we give people passes based on our own experiences. Mm-hmm. And we assume that people are thinking and behaving in the same manner in which we are. Mm-hmm. And that's how we ignore a lot of red flags, is that we have to understand that we have to see them with a clear vision. And sometimes you can't do that. You need people on the outside to help you do that. But to not see people's situations based on your experiences.
Yeah.
And that's what I've learned. And, you know, I'm in a different relationship now that is way different. And, but I have to remember not to look at what we're going through my own lens of what I've been through. And that's the trap that we can find ourselves in as women.
That's growth. And I'm gonna close this out with one, you know, that's a lot of wisdom, and I get it, and I agree, and we also don't realize, because perspective is it's subjective. I mean, it's like it's hard not to look at something from your perspective, because you're looking at everything from your eyes, right? Your heart, your view. I mean, it's hard not to do that. But it reminds me of one of those other sayings. It's I don't know if it's in my top 10, but it's in there somewhere. But also, when someone shows you their true colors, believe them.
The first time.
Yes, this first time. Don't let them paint all over your life and in your house, and they already showed you. You know, if they showed you, because there are some times, because I want to close it out by saying that, you know, it's clear. Like when homeboy pulled off, I mean, that was pretty clear. So it's like, when they show you what they're capable of doing, believe them. You don't always need to give people a pass. You know, I've done podcasts on, you know, taking self-inventory, know who you are, know what your triggers are, you know, identify when, you know, what pieces of your perspective are really coming from experience, but also look at things, you know, as a painting. When they show you what those colors are, believe them. If somebody say that's red, don't say no, that's blue. Right. It's red. So sometimes you gotta stop. Right?
Correct.
All right. So that being said, thank you guys for listening in. Love the comments, love the emails. I feel like I could do that's a fun thing about this, is that, you know, I could do red flags with can you imagine? I'm gonna have a male guest, a male co-host to do that. But you could have 5 other women, and the conversation would have a lot of similarities, but also be different. So this is kind of like a continuing conversation, that could be much bigger, because I know there's so many things that red flags we haven't even thought of. So please, send an email, asktiara@gmail.com, drop a comment, share, talk to your friends about it. I want to hear the stories. We want to hear the comments. I want to hear the feedback, and I just want you to stick with me. So until next time, take care of yourself.